On a long-gone chilly spring day, their mother settled down on her clutch of rich russet eggs. She sat quietly for hours, her patience rewarded by a vole or a mouse or a shrew delivered by her diligent mate. And now look at her reward, 3 beautiful young kestrels, primed and perfect, ready to launch into the summer air, to stoop and hover and stir our hearts. Welcome to Springwatch. Hello and welcome to Springwatch 2022. It's our final week of live broadcasting from Wild Ken Hill on the northwest coast of Norfolk. And if you've been watching for the previous 2 weeks, we hope that we've been delivering what our mission states, the very best of British wildlife this spring, and this time round a little bit of natural healing as well, a bit of nature's remedy. And we've got plenty more of that coming up this week and indeed in today's programme too.
Can I just say though, Chris, the sun has finally come out for our final week, and look at these poppies. What a gorgeous sight, all that delicious red, absolutely lovely. As Chris said though, it is our final week and Thursday was the end of week 2. Clearly we got a little tongue-tied because we were making up dates, names and even inventing species.
Hello and welcome to day 2, week 2 of Springwatch 2020.
Jibalula, Bang Bangus, after of course the Gumphead Chowder.
Highly pathogenic avian influenza.
A giant long tip-tailed nest. Long tit-tailed. I think it's a great name myself, don't you?
How many times have I told you to lay off the gin before the programme?
Just got a bit carried away.
Go into your little corner and there you are, necking it down.
What's your excuse then? You got the year wrong. Anyway, it just shows that it's live TV. But we've got to keep our eyes on that Yolo now and see if we spot any mistakes from him. Let's have a look at the map. Just a quick reminder of where we are. It's Wild Ken Hill. It's on the Norfolk coast. Nettersham's just to the south here. So we've got this wonderful farm, regenerative farming, rewilding. We've got the wetland and the woodland as well. And as you can see, we've still got a fantastic variety of birds and nests that we're watching.
And we can take a look at those live cameras now. As Michaela says, we've still got plenty of cameras out on those nests with lots of activity. You can see there we've got a fantastic choice. But let's not pick one of those. Let's take a look at our blackcap's nest. We were watching them last week. Now, look at this. It's empty. And I'm pleased to tell you that they've actually fledged. I'm very pleased to tell you that because in some studies of blackcaps it was found that only 30% of them fledge successfully. Why is that? Well, they're not very good at hiding their nest to start with. The adults are not very good at driving away predators and they're very vulnerable to rodents and corvids. So in some places just 30% make it. Ours did, and this is how they made it. These little chicks and the adults have got tricks up their sleeves to avoid that predation. So here they are in the early days after hatching. Lots of begging, but listen. No noise. Frantic visual activity, no acoustic activity. Staying quiet to avoid the attention of predators. We had a lot of heavy rain and sadly one of the youngsters died. It was duly removed by the adult. And then a change in strategy. At 7 days, the young become very, very vocal. Both adults attending now and upping the feeding rate because the chicks need to develop a lot more quickly. Now, they don't fledge in the true sense of just leaping into the air and flying away. Like so many of these species that we see nesting in the undergrowth, their mission is to get out into that undergrowth so that all the chicks aren't in the one vulnerable basket. So one left before the others, and then finally the last 2 push over the side. And they've done this in just 10, 11 or 12 days. Very, very quick. because they are vulnerable in that little nest, as we've already said. Well, I've got a blackcap's nest here. It's very small, and you'll notice it's not lined. Well, it's lined very sparsely with some thin grass. In fact, if I hold it up to the light there, you can see through it. Look at that. It's not very well insulated at all. And this plays a role in the way that the chicks develop and they respond to the potential threat of predators. So when they're very young, the adults are feeding them furiously. They're silent, so they're not drawing attention to the nest. Then at 7 days, the young begin to thermoregulate for themselves. They're generating their own internal body heat, which means that the female no longer has to brood them. She can join in the foraging for food. And for the next 3 days, that's costing them a lot. Their metabolic rate goes up, so the adults pile in with the food, and this allows those youngsters to fledge in a very short window, just those 3 days. So that gets them out of that nest, and it's a successful strategy which allows these birds to overcome the handicap of having a flimsy little nest, which is easy to spot by predators, whilst there's all of that activity with the adults going backwards and forwards. What about that?
Really interesting. Can I just look at the nest?
Yeah.
Because, you know, I think at home people see this little nest on their huge delis and you forget just how small it is. It's tiny. And it also is a good reminder of just how small the chicks must have been to fit in there. Fantastic to see them fledge.
Excellent.
What about our kestrels, though? Because we were thinking that they probably would fledge over the weekend. So did they? Well, let's have a look at their live nest. It's empty. The nest is in that tree. I can tell you the birds aren't around at the moment. So let's remind ourselves of the kestrel story. Because we first put our cameras on those kestrels on the 28th of May, and they were 3 weeks old, and they are inside that bark of the tree, of an oak tree. It's a cavity. There they are, 3 little white fluffy chicks, being fed diligently by both parents, mainly on voles, and all 3 did very well. Gorgeous shot of the adult coming out of the nest. Of course, they were very sheltered when we got the worst of the rain. 31st of May, you can see the feathers are coming through, less downy, and they start exploring. And we got lovely little views of them peeking out. Little bit clumsy, but a great place to just see where your balance is, and look at that, there the 3 of them are. By the 7th of June, they were using that tree as a bit of a climbing frame. So again, testing out their strength, having a little go at flying, and running around. And by the 11th of June, at the weekend, they were flying from branch to branch. Now, if they were in a nest box, they would have gone by now. We wouldn't see them again. But because they're by a tree, they can go from one branch to another, they can strengthen those wings, and they'll probably stick around there for another couple of weeks with the adults coming back and feeding them. But absolutely fantastic to see all 3 of them pretty much fledge, and in gorgeous light as well. I love that nest, really enjoyed it.
I think one of the kestrels has come back to the tree, has it? Has one of the kestrels popped back to the tree, did I hear you say? On the long lens, let's have a look, see if we can see that kestrel.
As I say, they...
Oh, it's a kite.
It's a kite.
It's a kite. OK, can't hold us responsible for that. But I tell you what, look, here we are back at the farm here. Here's our map. The kestrels were over on this side of the farm. We're down here, which means we're very close to those kites that you've just caught a glimpse of. In fact, they're in the woods just behind where Michaela and I are at the moment. So let's go live to the nest. There we are. One of the youngsters is there. Remember, we had 2 youngsters here, which is indicating that one has hopped away or even flown away. Let's go live to the bird that we saw in the tree and pay more attention to it, then see if it's one of the youngsters or if it's one of the adults. Judging by the length of the tail and the paleness of the head, I would say that was not the second youngster, that's one of the adults. But we've been watching this nest from the outset, of course, with keen interest. And we've seen those 2 youngsters becoming more and more bold. Lots of down at this stage, but then look, what a transformation. Not as pale as that adult we've just seen perch, but definitely a very striking and handsome bird. And just like all humans, all other animals have personalities. We see some brave and bold and adventurous kites, and some which are a little bit more calm and timid. And you can easily see which one's which in this nest. The bigger, bolder bird is branching. It's leaping from the nest, from branch to branch, building up its confidence, and then look, it's clearly escaped the tree, and here it is flapping back, albeit weakly, but certainly with enough skill to get it back to the nest. And for certainly the foreseeable future, the next few days, maybe a week or so, that nest will be used as a feeding platform. The adults are in the habit of bringing food back there. The young won't go too far, so they'll keep coming back to that nest to receive food. Of course, as they become stronger on the wing, then the adults will respond to their whining calls and deliver the food to wherever they are. But look at that. Look at the red tail of that youngster there. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. And here you can see it again, still continuing to practice its flying skills away from the nesting tree, and it pitches up in an adjacent pine. Stunning. Stunning stuff.
It's been so nice, hasn't it? Because we've been a week later than normal with this series of Springwatch, and it's allowed us to see the birds of prey actually semi-fledge and even fledge. Usually we'd leave them, they'd still be in the nest.
We'd miss that.
There's a bonus of being a week later. OK, time to join Megan. Has she fledged or semi-fledged? Well, in fact, she's branched out to the city.
Yes, Michaela, I love branching out. For me, I quite like a bit of a nomadic lifestyle, and this week I've found myself in Newcastle. I've got Newcastle city centre on my left-hand side and Gateshead on my right. And you might remember last week I was at Hawksley Nature Reserve, a beautiful coastal reserve filled with so much wildlife, but I've made my way slightly inland into Newcastle. And Newcastle is a fantastic city centre full of a different variety of habitats. It's an ecosystem in itself with gardens, streets, we've got allotments and so much more. Lots of wildlife making its home on the ledges and areas where we live. And with increasing number of people spending time in urban environments, estimated 70% of the global population by 2050, it's really important that we make the most of the wildlife that we have in our cities. And in Newcastle, there's over 300,000 different people making their home here. And the biodiversity is immense, because if you imagine all of the gardens across Newcastle, if you combined all of that area, it's actually more area than all of our national parks combined. So in our gardens and our natural spaces, our windowsills, whatever outdoor area we have, there's a lot we can do. And many of you have been sending in your photos and videos to us, and we absolutely love to see it. This was one of my favourite photos of a sparrowhawk that was sent to us from Llanelli in Carnarvonshire in North Wales. A beautiful sparrowhawk, very well adapted to urban living. Now, of course, they are a ferocious predator, and they're used to predating in dense vegetation, dense woodland. So actually, around the cities, they do quite well. And I always can tell, I live in Southampton, I can always tell when my sparrowhawk's around, because the birds on the bird feeder go very quiet, because obviously birds on a bird feeder might make a good meal for a sparrowhawk. Now, there was another photo that caught my eye. This is of a curlew on an airfield in Southampton, close to where I live. Now, curlews are our largest wading bird, an amazing species, and they're attracted to airfields because that open grassland mimics a habitat that we are losing from the UK. But they like it because it provides a bit of security for them with the fences. There's no disturbance there from people walking their dogs, for example, and of course predators. So curlews on airfields do relatively well. And then there was this video, a gorgeous nest with some great tits in it, nesting in a cavity in London. Thanks to Louise Brooker for sending this in. Listen to that. It's amazing what you can find when you use your ears and your senses. Getting quite big, it won't be long before they're starting to explore. That one on the left reminds me of Chris as a teenager. It's got a bit of a Mohican going on. Quite interesting, quite a cool style in my opinion. Now, of course, I'm here on the Millennium Bridge, and it's a fantastic spot, but I've got to make a quick dash for it because if you look over here, you can see the Baltic, and I'm going to be heading up there to delve into a really interesting population of residents here in Newcastle. But whilst I do that, I want you to sit back and relax and enjoy a gorgeous film from Tice Meadows, all about people getting involved with nature.
I'm very passionate about protecting this wonderful place that is really an urban reserve.
Tice's Meadow was a working gravel pit until about 10 years ago, but since it's been made into a bird reserve, it's become more and more important for the area.
It's right literally on my doorstep. I open the gate, step out, and I'm into the nature reserve here.
We believe we're the friendliest bird site in almost Great Britain.
Tice's Meadow was put up for sale in 2018. It was being looked at by a number of housing developers locally. We've had this hanging over our heads for 3 years now. Tice's Meadow Bird Group are the volunteers that help manage the nature reserve. Almost every day there's a member of the bird group working on site. Wintertime is all about getting ready for spring and summer when we can sit back and enjoy the wildlife. Our reed beds attract lots of birds, and lots of birds attract lots of bird watchers. Reed beds are a nationally important habitat. There used to be a reed bed in every village pretty much when people had thatched roofs. They were managed in the past as a resource, and now they need managing for wildlife. We're so lucky to have the community working here. You know, we could pay for some contractors to come in and do all the work, but it's much more fulfilling to have the community engaged on site. They can get a sense of ownership of the land, and they'll help us manage it going forward. We attract large numbers of sand martins at Tice's Meadow every year, so we decided we're going to build a new sand martin bank. That's a major project for the volunteers to look forward to.
One of the reasons that instigated the artificial bank being built is that there used to be sand martin colonies all around here, but as developments have happened and quarrying has persisted, all of their available spaces have been slowly dwindled and removed. So unless we do things like this, the sand martins, when they come back from their long trip from Africa, will have nowhere to make their nest. Always good fun doing these things. We tend to have a laugh as we're going along. Mistakes are made, as you do, and that's always much amusement to everyone. What better way to spend a day?
Until a few years ago, I had a small number of friends who were bird watchers, and now most of my mates are birders, and it's purely because of here. It's certainly the friendliest bird watching site I know of. We're all friends. We will make an effort at showing people the birds, and I think that's attracted more people. They've come up to this site, and we've made an effort to show them what birds they get on their doorstep.
Spring is a crucial time for the wildlife at Tice's Meadow Nature Reserve. All the birds are either sort of waking up after winter and looking for a mate and a territory, or the migrant birds are coming back from Africa. So spring is crucial, getting the site ready for the new breeding season. The first one for Surrey was actually seen this morning, so we're expecting ours any day now. The sun's shining, so it's looking good for an arrival. We'll have this ready just in time for the sand martins as they get back from Africa. The quarrying activities here attracted sand martins, and we had quite a number of pairs nesting here for a few years.
It would be a real bonus to have sand martins back.
I'm extremely hopeful. You never know with these sort of innovative designs, are sand martins going to use the new nesting box? Fingers crossed, and it's going to be exciting to find out. It's just wonderful to see so many reed warblers coming back and using the reed bed year after year. That just proves that the management work that we do with our volunteers is working wonders. We rallied around, we launched a petition which attracted 10,000 signatures. We achieved our goal in the end. Surrey County Council bought the site. backed by 5 other local councils, and now the site's been saved for the future generations.
It's a real joy. It's a real joy that from a small acorn, this great big oak tree is now flourishing.
Do you know, as individuals, we can make a big difference for wildlife, but when a whole community comes together like that, it makes a massive difference. So well done, all of you. Top marks there, absolute top marks. Now, I'm up here on the Isle of Mull off the west coast of Scotland, and so far we've had 2 weeks of unbroken sunshine. We've had fantastic scenery. We've had wonderful wildlife for you. The sun is gone, the famous Mull midges are out, but don't worry, we've got some treats for you again this week too. Now, if I was to ask you, which group of birds is Britain internationally famous for? Well, the answer is easy. The answer is seabirds. The latest survey shows that Great Britain and Ireland is home to more than 8 million breeding seabirds of 25 different species, and more than 5 million of those are found up here in Scotland. On Mull, most of the important seabird colonies are on the small offshore islands. So a week ago, I decided to head west, to head all the way out west here to the island of Staffa, famous for Fingal's Cave, but also famous for its seabirds. So I had a walk around to see what I could find. Sitting quietly in here, there's a lovely lump of rock there which has got probably, what, nearly 20 shags on it. They're like a smaller version, slimmer version of the cormorant, and this is a mixture of young birds and adult birds on here. The young birds are sort of browny, but the adults are in full breeding plumage now, and they are stunning. They're almost reptilian. They've greeny, bronzy colour feathers and a bright green eye and a bright yellow gape here as well. Really smart birds, actually. Look at this, this is really nice, marsh marigold. Now, back home in Wales, this was out in March. We're now in June and it's still out here. Just one small stream that's full of marsh marigolds. Lovely flower, really nice. Just settled down here to watch a common gull on a nest. And it's a lovely nest in amongst some thrift there on the floor. And actually, common gull, well, it's a bit of an anomaly, really. It's common up here, but much rarer when you get further south. So I don't see many of them in Wales these days. And what's even better is just landed just a few seconds ago on some sorrel on this bank here is a twite. Now, a twite is really scarce breeder, and it's very rare in Wales, very rare in England, only in the north of England, but more common up here. And I always think it's one of the Staffa specialities. Everyone comes here to see the seabirds, but I often come here just to see the twite. So it's nice to see one of those. Look at these cliffs, sheer cliffs dropping straight down to the sea. A few battles, I would imagine, going on here between the might of the Atlantic Ocean and these rocks. And what's brilliant is that they've provided a nest site for what I think is the coolest seabird of all, the fulmar. There's about maybe half a dozen pairs, I think, nesting on the cliff face there. And when they get airborne, they launch themselves off and they fly stiff-winged like mini albatrosses in the air, just using the breeze constantly. Cracking birds, I do like fulmar. Just walking round the island now, making my way back to the boat, and look what's come to say goodbye to me. The King of Staffa, or I should say the King and Queen of Staffa, two of them there. Great skewers. Impressive birds, nothing argues with a great skewer. It's a big, strong bird, and it'll kill virtually anything and everything on this island, and it's just sat up there looking at me as if to say, get off my island. And you know what? It's exactly what I'm going to do. Now, Staffa and these seabird islands, they're a safe haven for the birds. And why is that? Well, one of the main reasons is the fact that there are no mammalian land predators there. I'm talking about species like foxes, stoats, weasels, feral cats, and in particular rats. Rats are a big, big problem for these offshore islands. Now, I remember when I was working for the RSPB, one of the last things I got involved with was to eradicate rats from Puffin Island, just off the coast of Anglesey. We succeeded, but I was horrified to learn that rats are actually back on there, especially when you consider that one pregnant female rat arriving on an island, within 12 months, you could have over 1,000 rats on there. Now, there's an EU-funded project called Biosecurity for Life, and they've come up with guidelines for boat owners, for visitors, for anyone and everyone visiting some of these offshore islands. And I tell you, it's well worth a read. And if you want to learn more, well, there's a link to all those guidelines on our website. Right, it's time to leave Mull and its seabirds, go down to Norfolk and land birds and join Chris, who's looking at some of the nest cameras.
I am indeed, Yolo. Yes, I'm here in our mission control, our wildlife hub. All of the screens you see here are the feeds coming from the live cameras that we've rigged at Wild Ken Hill. Typically, this would be filled with our story developers who stay here for 24 hours a day, their fingers on the button to record any interesting behaviour. At the moment, we've got our doyens of our wildlife camera crew, Joe Charlesworth and Ian Simpson. But before we put their fingers into action, I want to introduce you to a new nest, one we haven't shown you yet. We had been showing you skylarks last week. You may remember they met a grizzly end when a hedgehog found the youngsters. Joe, let's take a look at the woodlarks, which we've now got a camera on. So we've got a nest, it's in the open, in one of the farm fields, mixture of crop and wildflowers. There were 5 youngsters in the nest, probably a second brood for these birds. And there you can see them hunkered down this evening. A little bit of down, wispy on their backs, and the beak of one of them in the foreground. We've been watching these birds, of course, throughout the course of the day, and we see quite a lot of activity. They're growing fast. Occasionally they have visitors in the form of a brown hare. Now, whilst they're being incubated, the female does all of the work, but as soon as they're being fed, both adults are out looking for their insectivorous prey. They'll take grasshoppers, spiders, beetles, any invertebrates like that. And here you can see them bringing them back. They're very secretive at the nest. They never fly directly into it or directly away from it. And if you watch here, you'll see that when they finish attending the chicks, they'll walk away from the nest, typically a distance of quite a few meters before they take to the air. That's why they're able to make sure that it's very well hidden from predators. Next up, Joe, what about herons? Herons have been very popular. Let's go to our second heron's nest. We had one we were watching last week with 3 very well-grown youngsters. This one we introduce you to has 2 unhatched eggs, they're not going to hatch now, and 1 youngster. Hidden at the moment by this brooding adult, but again, we've been keeping our eye on those herons, and earlier today we witnessed this. So the adult has come back and it's regurgitated half a water bird. Looks like it could be a coot. The youngster has got big ideas about a big meal. And of course, bear in mind that this has been in the stomach of the adult heron. It's been softened, it's been broken at least in 2, although the wings seem absent as well. But I honestly don't think that this grisly little dinosaur is going to get that down. And I know some people have found this young heron, an attractive character with its little punk haircut, but I can't help but thinking what we're witnessing now is absolutely grotesque. What's the answer? Well, look, it's found a smaller chunk. Oh my goodness me, look at that. Well, I hope you're enjoying your supper, because the heron certainly is. Okay, top work from the herons there. We've got to take a look at another one of our favourite nests. It's our marsh harriers. Ian, Joe, hit the marsh harrier button. Here they are. 3 youngsters in this nest, developing quickly now. Their down is disappearing. You can see their adult feathers coming through. One, oh, look at that, bliss, absolute bliss. A yawning young marsh harrier, its sibling sleeping on the tail of its neighbour. What a lovely scene that is. But of course, it's not always like this. There's lots of activity in the marsh harrier's nest. The adults have been fantastic. Mainly the female has been in attendance at the nest. Male tends to just drop food in. And here they are back a few days, a lot more down on them at this stage. They've hatched asynchronously, so one of them is quite considerably bigger and more advanced than the others. But that could also be down to their sexual dimorphism. The females are much, much bigger than the males, and that's noticeable even whilst they're in the nest. What else have we got? Let's have a look. What about the swallows? Top shot of the swallows, number 27. The swallows, there are 5 of them in the nest, and you can see here their pin feathers. So those are the waxy sheaths that are surrounding their flight feathers and their contour feathers. We're gambling on this because the adults have been in and out continuously, and we were hoping that they might just swoop in. They're not swooping in now, but we've seen them swooping in earlier today. The swallows have been very attentive. Again, they're feeding small insect prey. So that's lots and often is their technique, coming in. Okay, but I've got to be honest with you. I've been standing here. Oh, hold on, there's one more thing. We've got one of our kestrels. We think we found one of the kestrels which has jumped out of that oak tree. Is it? Oh, there it is. It's there, look. You have to peer between the branches, and you can see its short tail with that very distinctive cream tip identifies it as one of those 3 youngsters which has fledged our nest. And that's a lovely sight, isn't it, to see those young kestrels out and about in that big oak tree, quintessentially something of the UK summer there. But look, I've got to be honest with you, I've been standing here, we've been looking at all of these other nests, and I've had to contain myself because I'm now going to introduce you to a Springwatch first. It is a sensational nest that we've got a camera on, a very, very beautiful and peculiar bird. Ian, Joe, give us the nightjar. Yes! Oh my goodness me, look at that. I'm pleased to say you can't see me stroking my thighs furiously in quite an ornithologically perverse way, but that is a super sexy bird. Look at the vermiculate plumage, all of those fine lines which have transformed this bird's plumage into something that looks like old bark and broken heather. That's the female. She's incubating 2 eggs on that nest. And you may say, well, she's not doing very much. This is a minimalist nest, and for most of the day and the night, that's the case. But when you join us tomorrow, we're going to show you what she does do, and when she does do something, it's pretty special. What a nest. Nightjar. Thank you, guys. I'm so pleased. You made my year with the nightjar, and you're going to make everyone else's tomorrow night. Let's go back to Michaela. She's going to endeavour to answer a viewer's question about something that you might consider a little unpleasant that you'll find dotted all over our countryside at this time of year.
I am indeed, Chris, but first of all, can I say how much I love going into that wildlife hub every morning and watching all of those cameras, and I know lots of you do as well. But remember, you could do that from midday to 9:30 in the evening, and you've only got a few days left to make the most of them, so make sure you check them out. But as Chris said, I'm going to answer a question. We get lots of questions sent to us, and we particularly like this one, sent in by Sammy Moffat, and she sent in this picture asking us what it was. Well, Sammy, I can tell you that it's something that a lot of people might see in their gardens and parks. In fact, I have an example of one here, and it's called cuckoo spit. Now, it has very little to do with a cuckoo, other than the fact that you're likely to see it at the same time that you start seeing cuckoos coming into the UK, so at the beginning of spring. So if it doesn't have anything to do with a cuckoo or its spit, what is it? Well, have a look at this, because it's made by a little creature called a spittlebug, which is the nymph stage of a froghopper. And this bug feeds off a stem to protect itself, and then it forces air into fluid from its anus to make bubbles. And it keeps on making those bubbles until it's got enough to cocoon itself. Why does it do that? Well, it protects itself from predators, it also stops it drying out, and it helps to give it its own microclimate. And finally, it does one big bubble within all those little bubbles to then do the final transformation into its adult stage, which is the frog hopper. And there we go, there's the adult frog hopper. And it's something that I think is such a neat trick. In fact, sometimes I'd like to do that myself. I'd like to fart a whole load of bubbles all around myself to protect me from the outside world. What? I don't mean I want you to do it. You mustn't fart me a whole load of bubbles.
Oh, I tell you something. It's a televisual highlight. Using anal fluid to fart bubbles in the face of Michaela Strachan.
Oh, please!
Come on. Come on.
But you know, actually, it's really rather beautiful. With all these flowers and bubbles, it's turned into the Summer of Love, a hippie movie.
Hey, leave my arse alone when I'm farting anal fluid.
I'm not going to touch your backside. But anyway, let's go from the Summer of Love. Let's bring it back to some sort of sensibility and the love of spring. A time to see cuckoos spit and enjoy butterflies, especially on a beautiful day like today. If you take the time, then sometimes you are rewarded with
I'm ruining your link.
Flash of
I'm just
colour.
ruining
Get
it.
out of it with your bubbles. The ancient chalk downlands of Fontmell in Dorset are transformed in spring. As the warm sun hits the tumbling patchwork of grass and scrub, early orchids bloom. And some of our smallest and earliest butterflies start to emerge. Their tiny proportions, around the size of a 50-pence piece, mean that these are species often overlooked. But they bring to the Dorset hillside some of the most dazzling colours in nature. The male Adonis blue lives up to its name. Its upper wings are the most ravishing azure blue. This is a warmth-loving butterfly, only found in the most sheltered parts of southern England. It basks in short grass, warming the underside of its wings on heat from the ground, whilst the upper sides soak up the sun. And it needs to make the most of every ray. We don't yet have the long hours of sunshine that summer brings. But these wings are as efficient as any solar panel, and even a short burst of sun can be enough to allow them to spring into action. Adult Adonis only live for up to 7 days, so they've got a lot to pack in. Most importantly, finding a mate. The female Adonis blue is actually a rich chocolate brown and is well hidden amongst the scrub. But she's been spotted by a keen-eyed male. And it seems his luck is in. A sunshine-fueled romance. But few downland butterflies use the sun to greater effect than the green hairstreak. Unlike the blue Adonis, they bask with their wings firmly shut. Preferring a high perch, it has no ground heat to gain by opening its wings, so instead it turns the verdant underside towards the sun. But don't be fooled by its fabulous colour, because the UK's only green butterfly isn't actually green. At least, their emerald hue isn't caused by pigment. It's actually a special effect created when light hits the lattice structure of its wing scales. The shade of green changes depending on the direction of the light. When it's sunned itself sufficiently, it can get back to the important work of patrolling for females and defending its territory. By selecting a lookout post, like this tall privet, they can be poised, ready to intercept any passers-by.
This burnet moth is edging precariously close to the green hair streaks patch. And he's having none of it. It's not just other insects that need to watch out. If a rival male is spotted, he'll launch an attack, attempting to chase him away in a spiralling flight. When the tussle is over, he resumes his position on the privet. And when the sun goes in, tempers are cooled. Overcast skies limit both of these butterflies' ability to fly. Instead, they power down and pause. A well-earned rest from all the frenzied activity of spring.
Sometimes it really is something as simple as a flash of colour on a butterfly's wing that can bring a smile to your face and enhance your love for wildlife. And that can happen wherever you are, whether you live in a rural environment or, of course, in an urban. Now, I'm in Baltic Centre for Contemporary Art. You can see Gateshead behind me this way with Newcastle this way. And there's sirens, there's traffic, there's people. But there's one sound I bet you're hearing right now. Have a listen, and we'll spin around this way, and I can show you some popular, very famous residents here on the Baltic. Now, I'm talking, of course, about the miraculous kittiwakes. They are the most inland population of kittiwakes anywhere in the world, 13 miles away from the sea. Now, it's quite unusual to see them inland like this. Typically, they nest on cliffs or ledges like this, but sadly, they are internationally declining. And that's largely due to climate pressures, extreme weather events, and food availability. So what we're seeing is actually more kittiwakes are coming inland, and populations here are starting to increase. But come down, because this is when you get the best view, you get eye level with a kittiwake. And you can see them coming in and out, and they're interacting with one another. And at the moment, they're on eggs, and there's a few, maybe just one actually, that has a chick. And we've got our wonderful cameraman, Steve Phillips, over here, who I think is trying to get a shot of the lovely chick. Let's see what we've got right now. Now, the chick we think is only about 1 or 2 days old. That's the parent there, unfortunately having a little nap, but that's okay, because what we know is there's a really developing chick. Oh, it's moving. Is she gonna get up? No, not quite. Okay, gone back to sleep. But still, it's fantastic to see that these eggs are hatching. They can lay 1 to 2 eggs, so they're developing here. But across Newcastle, it is incredibly busy with lots of different action. They're not only nesting here on the Baltic, and whilst they're nesting here, they're still travelling up to 60 miles up to the Farne Islands to find food. Look at that. Landed in the wrong spot there, got told off by a neighbour. That's on the Tyne Bridge, 1,000 pairs, and this individual's taken nesting site above a lamppost. But they've got really unusual nests for gulls. They've got a lot of different mud and vegetation that they use. And look, the lovely egg there. And they've got amazing adaptations. They've got these curved claws as well as really powerful muscles in their feet so that they're able to grip onto ledges. But actually, it hasn't always been this case here, because if you go back to the early 90s, the Baltic actually had netting on it, quite dangerous netting. So what they did is they put up a tower. Now, this tower was to give the birds an alternative place to nest so that it wouldn't, you know, poo basically on the street. And eventually they found the right spot to put it in, and the kittiwake started nesting there. And in the late 90s, they removed that dangerous netting which is sadly still used today and can be a huge danger to wildlife and birds. And the kittiwakes returned because they found a great spot here. It's sheltered from conditions, and they're seemingly doing really well. And not only is it fantastic for the Baltic here, lots of people come to see the incredible art and the architecture, of course. So many people also come to see the kittiwake. So of course, we want to take that netting down and help increase bird populations in our cities, because it makes all of us happier to see more and more biodiversity. Now, Chris and I were here actually last summer, which was an amazing experience. But Michaela, over in Norfolk, have you ever been eye to eye with a kittiwake?
I've seen many kittiwakes, Megs, but I don't think I ever have actually seen them at that level. It's always incredible how they manage to balance on those ledges, isn't it?
Top spot, the Baltic, though. Great for art, great for natural art on the outside. Brilliant.
It's your perfect place.
It's a perfect place for me.
Let's catch up with our badgers. I say they're our badgers, they're actually Kate McRae's badgers, put in an artificial set that she made and put cameras in, and then Peggy on Valentine's Day gave birth to them. 9 weeks old when we saw them last week, and these are the 2 cubs. Underground in the set, remember it's dark there. This is filmed on our infrared cameras, doing a lot of play fighting, which is what you'd expect them to be doing at that sort of age. And then I know you're all looking at the telly going, oh, it's the 3 of them having a little cuddle, little spooning there, looking so, so sweet.
If we move over here, we can look at how rapidly they've been developing. So here we've got an adult badger to scale, so just so you can guess how big that is, there's a pound coin, so you can see exactly how big the badger is. When they were first born, here, 12 centimetres long, weighing just 130 grams, eyes closed, just a vestige of a stripe on top, pretty helpless, and weighing how much, Michaela?
That's about the weight of a Satsuma tangerine.
A Satsuma tangerine, that's 2 fruits in one. What a bargain on your stall down the market
One or the
on
other,
a Saturday.
whatever you want to call it.
Okay, we followed their journey of development all the way around here until we get to this size, which is the size when we're looking at them now. They're now 9 weeks old here, and you're going to tell me what they weigh in fruit, aren't you?
Yeah, 2 to 4 kilograms. It could be a melon or 2, and if you think I'm going to hold 2 melons up, you've got another thing coming. So that's it, you've got an idea of the height. Let's have a look at them at, well, they must be 2 melons and a little bit because they're 10 weeks when we catch up with them now. And at 10 weeks old, this is the very first time that they come out of the set. Sometimes they come out at 8 weeks. These ones are coming out at 10. First cub comes out. Can you imagine coming out and going into the light for the very first time? Looks a little bit nervous, but actually more inquisitive. Second one, however, pokes its head out, goes straight back in. It's clearly not as keen to follow its sibling and its mum, Peggy.
I like the way it comes out and immediately starts climbing, though. Boisterous little things, the badger cubs. Now, that was in black and white. It was just at the cusp of daylight. And not long after, when the camera had switched to colour, we saw this. So Peggy returns to the set. Remember, she's got 2 cubs, and you can hear her whickering away there. That sounds like she's having a bit of a squabble off screen. Dives down in there, like telling off that second cub's getting. And at this point, I think it's getting dragged by the scruff of the neck up that entrance hole, and it's being led away. Where's it off to? Well, she's probably now going to integrate these cubs into her social group at the main set. Remember, she'd come here for some privacy while she was giving birth to them. The near future, well, they'll go through their development. It's unlikely that they're going to start roving too far away from the set. Badgers don't tend to do that. But we can hope that they live a long and healthy life. How long would that be? Well, not that long. We find that in 40% of our badger sets, they are 4 years or younger. 4 years or younger. 6 is old. How old do you think the oldest badger ever recorded was?
Oh, 12.
No. In the Czech Republic in 1979, a zoo there had a badger that was 18 years and 7 months old.
Amazing.
18
Amazing.
years for a badger. That's incredible, isn't it?
And hopefully we will catch up with our little family of badgers before the end of the series. But from beautiful badgers breeding underground to Yolo with some glorious golden eagles breeding high above.
Yes, indeed, golden eagles. And do you know what? We've spent a lot of time talking about white-tailed eagles here on Mull, 21 pairs, but we've rather neglected our golden eagles, and yet there are 30 breeding pairs here, one of the highest known breeding densities anywhere in the whole of Europe. And these pairs, well, they nest on cliffs and crags, some of them inland and some of them on the coast. And we got a special license from Nature Scott, sent our wildlife cameraman out there to film one of these sites. Here it is on a sea cliff, very sheer cliff. See that there's one chick, one large chick in there, about 5 to 6 weeks old, adult coming back with prey for it. Huge nest made out of branches and sticks and bits of heather lined with sedges and grasses. And this pair's actually got 9 different nest sites along the coastline. Chick is feeding itself at this stage. They do that from about 5 weeks onwards. You can see it's got feathering coming on the wing, and that happens roughly at about 5.5, 6 weeks, but it's still a lot of down on the head, a lot of down on the neck. You won't lose that for another maybe 7 to 10 days. Now, the one problem is that this nest is facing southwest. It's very exposed. Any extremes of weather goes right in, and the poor chick just trying to shelter in there. And do you know what? We were hoping that that rain would pass over and that chick would be fine. And we had to withdraw our camera crew. That's how bad the rain got. And unfortunately, over the weekend, it got even worse. The wind whipped up, the rain lashed down, the sea was stormy, even the sea locks were stormy. It affected a lot of wildlife, not the seals, of course. They're fine. They can dive into water. The goslings and the geese just came out on land, but the white-tailed eagles suffered as well. Some of the nests very exposed, so they just hunkered down there. And have you ever seen such a miserable white-tailed eagle? Just look at that, a noble bird in the rain. Just doesn't look good at all there, does it? Poor, poor thing. Now then, we were genuinely concerned about our chick. Why do I say that? Well, because of what happened last year. Last year, that same pair of eagles nested in a different, even more exposed nest. And at the end of May, we had some terrific storms up here. And that, unfortunately, blew the nest out. And the nest watchers arrived a few days later to find a dead chick on the ground. That chick is 3 to 4 weeks old. Such a shame there. Not just the chick, but as I said, the whole nest blew out. But the one positive to come out of that is that a lot of prey remains came down with that nest, and we were able to have a look, have an insight into the eagle's diet. And I've got a few of them here, just a few. This one is the skull of a hare. Lots of hares here on Mull. Mountain hare, Irish hares here, so it's an important source of food for these eagles. This one is a hooded crow skull, the version of carrion crow up here. Of course, plenty of those about, so I would imagine that again is a plentiful supply of food for those eagles. This is a bit more interesting. This is the skull of a kestrel. Small bird of prey, the wingspan, around 70 centimetres. The eagle, of course, is 2 meters across, but the eagle is incredibly agile for such a big bird, so it's no wonder that occasionally they will take eagles. And then the final one, most interesting of all, that is the skull of a mink. A mink is a non-native invasive species. It can cause havoc in some of these offshore islands, taking the eggs and chicks of birds like terns, but this one has been gobbled up by the golden eagle. And what this shows us is just how adaptable these golden eagles can be. They will take advantage of whatever's available. Now, we are truly worried about our eagle chick, so much so that we sent our wildlife cameraman Jim out again this morning. Unfortunately, he hasn't come back yet, but we're hopeful that we'll have an update, a positive update for you tomorrow. Right, everyone take a collective deep breath now, because it's time for our mindful moment, a minute and a half of nothing but the sights and sounds of nature. Tonight, we've got a real treat for you. We have 90 seconds of grey wagtails on a mountain stream.
Lovely. I've always had a soft spot for grey wagtails. First bird I ever saw through my first pair of binoculars.
Do you remember that?
I do remember. I remember it clearly because I misidentified it as a male Baltimore oriole.
What age were you?
12.
Well, that's incredible.
Cycled home,
isn't it?
showed my dad the field guide and said, "Hey Dad, look at this, I spotted a North American rarity." He flicked through and said, "Probably a grey wagtail, son. Try harder."
And you haven't got a thing wrong since then, probably. Right, we've checked out quite a few of our birds of prey so far, the kites, the kestrels, the marsh harriers. We haven't checked in on our buzzards, so let's just catch up with them. This is how we saw them on Friday, 10th of June. They've still got a lot of down on them, but they were all doing really well and stretching a bit too. Well, what a difference a weekend makes, because look at them now. I mean, look how brown those feathers have got. Still a little bit of down there, but they really are developing well, flapping their wings. But we are a little bit concerned, because just take a look at the nest. It's small. Chris and I reckon this is the first time this nest has been used, so it's not deep, it's not big, it's not very substantial. And the more those chicks flap and move about, as you can see, the more clumsy they're beginning to look. They're irritating each other because there's just not enough room. And they're only 30 days old. Parent watching on, a little bit concerned. They're all settled down now, but they won't fledge till they're about 55 days old. So they've got a long way to go. So what is going to happen if they fall out? Will they be able to get back in? Well, let's have a look at them now, make sure all three of them are safe and sound. And they are. In fact, it looks like they've just been brought to feed. Very difficult to see what that is. What do you reckon though, Chris? Would they be able to get back in if they fell out?
No, if they fall onto the ground at that stage, they're pretty much doomed, to be honest with you, to ground predators. I think principally foxes, badgers, those sorts of things. But they've got to just be careful in that tree. What we don't know is there could be some branches below that would break their fall. But sadly, that's all we've got time for tonight. Do join us tomorrow night, because tonight is the night, but tomorrow night is the big night. The night of the nightjar. Oh, look at that. Oh.
And I'll be coming back to ground to look at an urban allotment and see some secret visitors.
And I'm going to be looking at some of Mull's beautiful orchids.
So we'll be back at 8 o'clock tomorrow, 1 o'clock. It's Watch Out with Hannah Stitfall. She'll be chatting to Yolo. But in the meantime, get someone to make you a nice cocoon of bubbles to protect you from the world and shut out all of that noise. And if you can't make them themselves, well, get a friend to do it. It really is the spring of love. We'll see you tomorrow at 8 o'clock. What a sight that is. Bye-bye.
To find out more about uncovering urban wildlife and about how regenerative farming affects our countryside, go to bbc.co.uk/Springwatch and follow the links to the Open University.